Hey! I don't know where I was going to go with that. I really have no idea where I was going with that. Welcome back. I'm Paul Slavonik, the author of Legacy Drive. And before I forget, let us roll the intro. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about the process of writing and also some of the tie-ins and where I got a lot of the concepts of Legacy Drive from. But before we get going, an excerpt from Legacy Drive. As Bill continued his cooldown lap back to the pits, the winning driver pulled up alongside of him to give him a thumbs up as a sign of respect for a hard-fought battle. Bill returned the gesture in kind. As the driver accelerated away, however, Bill flipped him a hand gesture, which was not so kind. That was not very nice of Bill. You need to respect your fellow drivers, Bill. Dang race car driver. So, for people who've actually finished Legacy Drive, you probably noticed a few, or maybe you didn't, maybe you had no idea. You may have caught a few kind of tie-ins, if you will, from different stories and different movies or whatever. So I'm kind of I don't want to say I'm a movie buff, but I do love a lot of older movies. A lot of the new stuff out is just garbage. So there are a few movies that really I pulled a lot of inspiration from as far as like storytelling goes, not borrowing stories or whatnot. But one of the main movies, oddly enough, is Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump, it gets ridiculed because of the whole "run, Forrest, run," that whole thing, right? But when you look past that all, some of the silliness of it, it really is kind of a masterpiece in storytelling from my perspective. You get a lot of different emotions in it. You get happiness, you get sadness, you get a lot of suspense because you're going through someone's life from their viewpoint, narrated from them. For those who have actually read Legacy Drive, you'll notice that at the beginning, it's someone narrating the story. They're telling someone, this is how it all began. And when you get all the way through to the end, that's kind of where it picks up again. So it's during the prologue all the way to the epilogue, it's someone telling a story. And that's kind of how Forrest Gump is. So that was a big inspiration. One of the other inspirations, not so much from a storytelling standpoint, but just from an author's standpoint, comes from a guy named Drew Karpyshyn. And I hope I'm not butchering his last name, but he's my favorite author. And for those who don't know me personally, I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to pull this out. So Drew Karpyshyn wrote a book, a trilogy, if you will, on Darth Bane. It's a Star Wars trilogy that has since been decanonized by Disney, which I'm not happy about. Drew's writing, I remember before I read the Darth Bane trilogy, I was never really a reading buff. I would do it because, school or whatever would, make me do it, obviously. But when I first heard that, a book was coming out about, a character that I really didn't know much about, I was intrigued, and I think he released like the first chapter of it online. And when I read it, I was like, I have to read this. So I ended up buying the book, completely blown away by it. From a Star Wars standpoint, I loved it. I loved the simplicity of it. Drew doesn't take a full page to describe. My cat has decided to visit me. For those who don't know what this is a bona fide cattail that is in my face. So what I still love about Drew's writing is the simplicity of it. He's not the kind of guy that will take a full page to describe a pencil. His writing is very imaginative, if I'm pronouncing that right, imaginative, to where you can really just visualize. He gives you enough to visualize what he's talking about, and then he moves on. So it's enough to where you can really just grasp in your mind what it is that he's talking about. And I really tried to kind of get that same feel, that same vibe in Legacy Drive. So those were two of the biggest inspirations that I pulled from into Legacy Drive. And as I mentioned in the first video, the first chapter is pretty long. There's like 3 different segments within one chapter. So you really get an idea of who Bill Watson is. The reason I did that is because there needs to be a foundation. I wanted to get that foundation just kind of put in place as soon as possible, so that way you can kind of carry on into what the story is. So early on we learned that Bill Watson is a race car driver. He races in a series called TA2, which is a part of the SCCA, the Sports Car Club of America. And the reason I chose the TA2 series is, number one, obviously Bill is here in the United States. You learn later on that his father, William Watson, came from Australia, racing in the Australian Touring Car Series. There needed to be kind of a close tie into that. I didn't want to do NASCAR because I'm not really a NASCAR fan. Maybe I'll get into that later, but it needed to be road racing. NASCAR doesn't really do a lot of road racing. So TA2, in my opinion, was the closest thing to it, with the big heavy stock cars that resembled the cars that he raced at that particular time. We learned that Bill is a race car driver. We learned that he's a family guy. He's married, he has a son. His wife is Lena, his son is Chad. And we learned that he is very much supported by his family in his racing endeavors. And then we also learned that Bill owns his own business, and that's also the sponsor of his race car. So Bill Watson is a guy who seems to have it all together. He's got, race car, he's got, the American dream, wife and a kid and his own business and everything. Obviously that's going to mean that he's pretty established financially. It's important that I lay that foundation early on to set where the story is going to be going next. And as we progress into this, we'll kind of dive a little deeper into Bill's character and his drive to win, even though he says sometimes that the racing stuff is not really about his family heritage. The things he does kind of make you think otherwise, but I'll leave that up to you, and that's something we'll talk about in a later video. One more little tidbit before we go. This coming weekend, I actually have my very first book signing at Half Price Books at the flagship location in downtown Dallas. So I'm looking forward to getting out there and meeting a few of you guys, and also hopefully there'll be more book signings down the road. Probably starting here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which is where I'm from, and then maybe expanding to other states in the U.S. So we'll see. That's definitely a possibility. But that's going to wrap us up today. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. If you like what you saw, if you want to support the channel, please hit that subscribe button. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on social media or leave them in the comments below. And I will see you all next time. Thank you.